When I got my first job as a high school English teacher, I couldn't have been more excited. It was a day I'd been waiting for a really long time. What an opportunity. I came in before the semester started to arrange my classroom. I put encouraging posters up on the walls. There may have been a kitten on one of them. Do you remember that one? Hang in there. I arranged my desks in a semicircle, imagining the deep discussions I would have with my students about reading and writing and learning. And when the students arrived, they were everything that I'd hoped for. They were energetic, they were smart, they were funny, they were energetic. I think I mentioned that. I had one class of 34 students. It was some kind of hazing ritual, I think, for my administration to make sure I was up to the task. 28 of them were boys, 6 girls. Those boys gave me a run for my money. They would not do a thing that I said. They came barreling into the classroom every day, making noise, laughing, throwing things. I couldn't even get them to sit in the desks. So that was difficult because it wasn't quite what I'd imagined. So I worked hard. That's really what I had to fall back on. I worked hard to interest them. And I thought if I could be interesting enough and funny enough that I could hold their attention, and they would learn and they would love it, and they would love me too. There's one problem, and that's that I'm neither that interesting nor that funny. It's really true. I'm quite ordinary. I really couldn't command the attention just like that of 28 boys and 6 girls. So there were times, though, that my students thought I was interesting and funny, and mainly it was just when I injured myself in my classroom, which, if you know me, you know I'm clumsy, and I fall down all the time. It's good my desks were in a semicircle because there was a landing zone in the middle of the classroom. The worst example of this was a time when I tripped over the garbage can, spun in a circle trying to regain my balance, which was hard because I was 8 months pregnant and very large. I couldn't regain my balance, and I fell completely in the lap of the most painfully shy student I've ever met. And so, Michael, if you're out there, I'm sorry. I know I think I damaged you both physically and emotionally. It's true. So I worked hard to interest my students. And I think that paid off. That was a good place to start from. One day, about halfway through that first semester, I was cleaning up my classroom at the end of the day, all the balled up bits of paper and the snacks that were shoved into the desks and wiping off graffiti. And there on the desk, there was something written that caught my attention because I saw my name. My name at the time was Ms. Knelson, and it said, Ms. Knelson rocks. Wow, that was so exciting. Here was evidence I was doing it. I was reaching my students. They loved me and they were learning. So I didn't wipe it off. I left it there, thinking that other students might write nice things as well on the desk. And they did write other things when I went back the next day to have a look. Someone had crossed out the word rocks and written in over top, sucks. Well, I was crushed. It actually said something quite a bit more offensive than that, but for today's purposes, let's say it said, Ms. Knelson sucks. Well, that really hurt because I cared about my students, and I had tried just as hard on the day that I sucked, and I'd cared just as much as I did on the day that I rocked, and I couldn't understand the difference. Why did one student love me and another one seemed to hate me? And that's when I had a really important realization, and one that has stayed with me for my entire career and has been a guiding force for me. And that is, it's really simple. It's not about me. It's about the students. And somehow I had made teaching about me, and I needed to take the focus off of myself and put it onto my students. So I was discouraged. I was a bit discouraged by the graffiti. But the thing that got me down, I think the most that first semester, was our typical classroom routine of assigning and marking student work. You know how it goes. The teacher wants the students to practice and demonstrate a learning outcome. In my English classroom, that could have been writing a strong thesis statement. In a math classroom, it could be graphing the quadratic equation, whatever. So we think of tasks so that students can practice and demonstrate the learning outcome. Well, I tried really hard to think of interesting tasks, and I noticed right away that some of the students had perfected the art of getting the most marks, that's the currency we use, out of a task. And some other students had perfected a different skill, and that was the skill of doing just enough to get by, just enough to pass. I came to think of it as being quite efficient. And so what bothered me was that a lot of those students seemed to me just as intelligent, just as creative, just as interesting as the students who got high marks, and that bothered me as a teacher, because I wanted all my students to do well. I was also troubled and down a little bit because of marking itself. It's kind of boring. And it can be quite dreadful to read the same paper over and over again. But I wanted my students to really learn, and so I wrote a lot of feedback. I wrote paragraphs of feedback for them, thinking they'd read it, they would take that feedback, and they would learn and do better the next time. But that's not what usually happened. I noticed that my students, when they got their papers back, didn't even read the feedback. They looked at the mark, the number on the paper, and quite often they crumpled and tossed it, or just set it aside. That was heartbreaking. I invested a lot into that feedback, and I really wanted my students to learn. When you think about it, the way that we assign and mark schoolwork is nothing like real-world work. In my job, if my employer gives me a task, and I do half of the task, or I do the whole task, but to half the quality expected by my employer, will she say to me, "All right, Cori, that's D work, here's your next task"? I don't think so. I think I'd have to complete the task to the quality expected, or I'd probably lose my job. I've never understood why we expect less than that from our students in schools, why we allow them to practice doing a poor quality of work. That bothered me. But I noticed, because I coached volleyball, which was great fun, that when my students, even the most efficient ones, were in an extracurricular activity, playing a sport, participating in a club, singing in the choir, I saw a different kind of kid. They came alive, they were excited, they practiced over and over again. They really seemed to be learning. Even when students are just talking to each other about something that interests them, even if it's just video games. I have 2 boys. We allow them to play some video games. We try to limit their screen time. I think that's important. That's the responsible thing to do, but they love them. And they will invest everything in that if we let them. They will network online with their friends. They will research all the little tips to help them unlock the next level. They will spend hours practicing. That's the kind of learning I wanted from my students. I wanted to see that engagement. I needed them to level up. And so this was the beginning of a big shift for me. I went away in my own classroom from a traditional sense of marking and assigning work. And I moved to something that was a little different, something that offered a lot of choice, was connected to student interests, and required the students to master the learning outcomes that I was after. It was a pretty simple idea, really. For every unit of study, I gave them a learning agreement. And the agreement listed the essential outcomes that the students had to learn for that unit. And I didn't just give them assignments, I gave them a menu of options. So they had to exercise some choice. What do you want to do to show me the learning outcome? But better yet, if my student had an interest or a passion, I encouraged them to propose a new assignment to me, one that they'd thought of themselves, one that would marry their interest with the learning outcome that I was looking for. And it was amazing what students soon began to do. I no longer had to be the interesting or funny element in the classroom. The students brought the interest, the life, the fun. I had a girl, she was a seamstress, she loved to sew. We were studying Macbeth, and she made a quilt. It was large enough to fit a double-sized bed. We were studying symbolism. Every block on the quilt showed a different symbol from the play. It's not a happy play. I don't know if you've read it, but a lot goes wrong. So I wouldn't hang this quilt or maybe sleep under it. Give you nightmares. But it was a beautiful piece of work. Students danced. They cooked. They went out into the community. They found ways to involve their skateboard. It was really exciting, and I had a lot of fun. I miss those days. These days, I'm a high school principal, and I love my job. It's important work. Leadership is so important. I don't know if everyone thinks about high school principals that way, though. I say that because recently I had the opportunity to go with our school choirs and bands on a music tour. It was great fun. These are fantastic, talented kids. But on the bus to our destination, they selected 4 movies to watch. Every single one of the movies that they liked, that they chose, had a high school principal in it. And these are miserable, wretched creatures, I think primarily just concerned with removing people's budgets. And perhaps I've become a bit like that, but I do really care about my job. As a high school principal, I would love to run a whole school this way, where students were offered choice, where their learning was connected to their passions, and where they had to master the learning outcomes. But it's not easy to change. The division that I work with, Regina Public Schools, has spent a lot of time, invested a lot of energy trying to change our structures so that our teachers can collaborate, co-plan, and co-teach. That's really important. I fully support that work. I believe isolation is the enemy. We need to take teachers out of isolation because we do our best work like we see today when we think together, plan together, and work together. We've even spent a lot of time trying to change our structures, our timetables, so that students can be flexibly grouped by interest, and that's great. But you know, even in the most traditional setting, if you have one teacher and a classroom full of students, you've got a classroom full of human beings. Each one of them, no matter their age, brings a set of questions, a set of interests, a set of beliefs, a set of passions. Co-plan with them, co-teach with them. It changed my career. Right now, this year, I've had the opportunity to have a bit of an experiment in the high school where I work with some staff and some students. And we've opened a classroom called The Zone. In The Zone, students don't take classes. They negotiate projects based on their areas of passion and interest with their teachers. Now, we still need to assign marks to classes. The ministry asks us to do that. And so we've developed a list of outcomes. And as students demonstrate the outcomes required by the curriculum, we check them off the list. And when they complete an outcome list for a class, we negotiate a final mark with them for the class. This is really exciting work. Our students are so amazing. They qualify for The Zone by being completely disengaged with the traditional structure of high school. So some of our students haven't attended classes regularly in a while. Some of them haven't passed a class in a while. They're so smart. They're so creative. Just one example is Tennille, and I just want you to picture her because what you notice right away is her hair. She does her own hair, and it's beautiful. It's every color of the rainbow. It's bright purple, green, orange, yellow. It's always changing. And when we asked her at first, what's your interest? She said, I don't know. But you just look at her. She's an artist, and she's interested in fashion. And so that's what she's working on. And it's been really exciting to watch that process unfold. We have a hope that someday soon our Zone students will be able to accomplish their learning outcomes in the community. That by partnering our students with a mentor in the community who shares the same passion, or perhaps someone who works in the field that our students are interested in, that they could have even more engaging learning because it's authentic, because it's real world work. We're really excited about that possibility in the future. But this isn't just a message for schools and for students and for teachers. This is really for everyone. Are you taking that time to connect to the things where you find your passion? Are you still learning? Human beings are designed to learn. We're alive. Do you get how great that is? There's a whole world to learn. We're here to learn it. No one gets to be bored, right? So I take some inspiration from desks and from schools, but look at this desk. It's rigid. It's uncomfortable. It demands uniformity. I'm just not sure that a rigid, uncomfortable, uniform kind of learning is the learning that will solve the problems of the 21st century. I'm not sure that's the learning that will unlock the potential of the 21st century. We need learning that's flexible, that's personal, that's passionate. That's the kind of learning I want for my two sons. Noah, who's 14, and loves the outdoors. Jake, who's 11, and lives for science. That's the kind of learning that will change schools, and that's how we'll connect to possibility. Thank you.